Hi, everyone. I saved the best thing for last. I know lots of you have been waiting for this. I have been waiting for it as well. This is the eighth part of Sunshine from my friend Kitty. Hi, Kitty. Thank you so much for commissioning. Thanks for me for supporting me on Patreon, for getting me to do this thing that I am doing. It is now for you. Let's do this. I'm so excited to find out how this conversation is going to go. I did laugh then. Everyone believes she is, but no one knows we're what. No, don't tell me. It would spoil it. Besides, Mrs. Bielowski is one of the good guys. I don't care what her blood has in it. It is a violation of your personal rights to have blood taken by a doctor examined for anything but the disease, or a condition you signed a release form about before the lab tech got near you with the needle, but accidents happen. One of the other ways you could guess a weir or a demon is by their paranoia about doctors. Fortunately, the lab coats perfected artificial human blood 50 years ago, or nearly perfected it. You need about 1 in 10 of the real thing, so donating blood isn't so big a deal anymore. And the nasty-minded don't necessarily get any ideas looking at blood donor lists about who isn't on them. Human magic handling doesn't pass through transfusion. Demon blood won't make you a demon, and weak part demon might not show at all, but strong part or full demon makes a full-blood human very sick, even if the blood type is right. And being a weir transfuses beautifully every time. I know I've said it a bunch of times, I just love the world building in this book so much. I couldn't have said it better myself, said Jessie. So you grew up being your mom's daughter with no higher ambitions than the best cinnamon rolls in the country. Did you know about your dad? I hesitated, but not very long. More or less. I knew he was a magic handler, and I knew he was a member of one of the important magic handling families, or I found that out since I was in school. I found that out once I was in school, and some of the magic handler kids mentioned the blazes. I was using my... Sometimes the words just jumble out of me. I was using my mom's maiden name by the time I went to school, and before she married Charlie. I knew that my dad being a magic handler was something to do with why my mom left him, and at the time, that was enough for me. I thought about the business associates my mom hadn't liked. That was what she'd always called them. Business associates. It sounded a lot like pond slime or sorcerer. As I got a little older, I realized that people like my mother mean pond slime when they say sorcerer. Lunatic, toxic, collie pond slime. I felt like my mother's daughter, you know. And after we cleared off, I never saw my dad again. I'd never said this to anyone before. My mom was so determined to have nothing whatever to do with my dad's family that I wanted to be as much like her as possible, didn't I? She was all I had left. They all nodded. So you didn't know anything about what your own heritage might be? I did know something. My dad's mother, showed up again a year after we geared off. I used to visit her at her old cabin at the lake. Oh boy, she'd meet me there. My mom wasn't happy about it, but she let me go. My gran told me some, taught me some. Taught you, Jessie said sharply. Yeah, stuff changing mostly, little stuff, enough to know that I had something, but not so much that I had to use it, you know. They nodded again. Magic handling, like other blood, often makes its presence known whether you want to know or not. But if it wasn't too strong, it would probably also leave you alone. If you left it alone. Probably, except now she hasn't left it alone. Oh, shit. Then my gran disappeared. When I was about 10, just before the wars, and just when Charlie married my mom. Charlie didn't seem to mind having me around. He adopted me, let me get underfoot at the coffee house. And yeah, I was drawn to cooking. I've been cooking or trying to cook since I was like 4. Pretty sad, huh? A blaze with frosting on the end of her nose. Once I got to Charlie's, I thought that was the end of the story. And then 2 months ago, said Jessie, why did I feel there was something else going on with these guys? Like we were having 2 conversations, one of them silent. It seemed to me that this out loud one was enough. What do they know? What do they know? They know, don't they? They have to know. I sighed. All I did was drive out to the lake on my night off. I had a headache. I wanted some peace and quiet. You don't get that anywhere around my family, including away from the coffee house. I just had my car turn around. It was a nice night. There hasn't been any trouble at the lake that I know of since the wars were over, so long as you stay away from the bad spots. I drove out to our old cabin, sat on the porch, looked at the water. That was as much of the story as I had told before. I still wasn't expecting my heart rate to speed up, my stomach to hop back and forth like water on a hot griddle, and tears to start pricking the backs of my eyes at the prospect of telling even a little bit more. I looked down at my shapeless Jersey kid's pajama lap, and then glanced at the table knife on Jessie's desk. The world started to turn faster, and at a funny angle. Jessie reached into a bottom drawer and brought out a bottle of, oh, hey, single malt scotch. Some softs did know how to live. Theo had turned the primetime bag upside down. There was an assortment of greasy paper-wrapped bundles, and they smelled like food. Real human food. Have a sandwich, said Theo. Have some chips. Hey, Pat, you're living dangerously. Have a primetime brownie. No, thanks, I said automatically. Too much flour, too much raising agent, and the chocolate they use is only so-so. No, I like. She immediately snaps into that. Your color's improving, said Jessie. Tell us more about Primetime's sins. I'm sure their bread isn't as good as yours either. It isn't. Have some scotch. I held out my empty tea mug. I had half a Swiss cheese and watercress sandwich on mediocre anadama to give my stomach something else to think about. The dark stains on the walls in the alley, the gobbets among the cobblestones. Stop that. Okay, I should maybe think about what Pat and Jessie and Theo were trying to give me space to say. To be afraid of? Something they had to do that had to do with, however good their cover, how they must be afraid of being found out as part-bloods. No, it hadn't occurred to me before. I didn't think there was a word for a human so sicko as to rescue a vampire, because no human had ever done it before. Dear gods and angels, no. It's not only paranoia and bureaucratic oppression that demands part-bloods be registered. Human magic-handling genes and certain demon genes mix really badly. There are lots of minor charm twisters who have a touch of both the human capacity for magic and the demonic, and there's a story that some of them can do stuff no one else can, although it tends to be more goofy than useful. But this is strictly trivial magic handling. Not all demons can do magic, some of them just are, although the R-ness of demons can seem magical when it isn't. The swallow demon, to take a rare but spectacular example, can fly less because of its hollow bones, although it has those too, than because something funny goes on with some of its atoms, which behave in certain ways as if they exist in some other universe. One of these ways is that they have no gravity in this one. So a swallow demon, despite being the size of anything from a large wardrobe up to and including a small barn, flies. It is a magic. Swallow demons don't do magic. It only looks like magic. But a lot of demons also handle magic, some of them as powerfully as powerful humans do. And a drop of their blood into a strong human magic handling gene pool is a disaster. Holy shit. Strong magic handling genes, and even a weak unmanifested for generations magic operating demon gene in the same person gives you about a 90% chance of being criminally insane. It might be as high as 95%. There are asylums specifically built to hold these people and tend to be extremely hard to hold. Or who tend to be extremely hard to hold. Important, Matt... It's funny, my boyfriend is trying to catch up on the X-Files so we can watch the new series and I can hear the theme song playing in the bedroom. Important magic handling families, for obvious reasons, therefore become kind of inbred. Although this isn't an ideal solution either, because over the generations you start getting more third cousins who can maybe write a word sign that almost works, say, and usually fewer children total. In one way, this is a relief. Someone whose human magic handling DNA isn't up to more than a ward sign that almost works is in little, if any, danger from a big Thor demon-blooded great-great-grandmother on the other side, even if her magic genes have played very neat hopscotch over the intervening generations and come through nearly intact. Excuse me. That's actually another tale. Yes, there are stories, at least one or two of them impressively documented, about strong doers and apparently on-the-skids magic-handling families whose magic turns out to be demonic in origin. But all of those stories, all the ones with happy endings anyway, are about families whose magic handling has been moribund for generations. People with fathers under even the suspicion of being sorcerers need not apply. On the other hand, important magic handling families need to go on handling magic to remain important. Oh, let me do this sentence again, because now I get... On the other hand, important magic handling families need to go on handling magic to remain important magic handling families. The Blaze's name still casts a long shadow. But even I knew they'd hit their peak a while back, and that there weren't many of them, us, around anymore. There didn't seem to be any at all left since the wars. I hadn't thought about this. It might have been an issue if I had wanted to be a magic handler, but I didn't. It's pretty amazing what you can not think about. To the extent that I thought about it at all, I missed my gran. But it was a lot simpler to be Charlie Seddon's stepdaughter. Outcrosses in a magic handling family on the decline, like me, are viewed with mixed feelings. We may be salvation, we may be catastrophe. It depends on the bloodline on the other side. Dubious outcrosses are often exiled or repudiated by the family. It's easier if the alien parent is the mother too, because then they can claim she was fooling around. Paternity tests applied to bad magic crosses are notoriously unreliable. Excuse me. No, there was no whisper of demon blood in my mother's family. Would I know? My mother's sisters were both several sandwiches short of a picnic in terms of common sense. They were not the kind of people who would be entrusted with dark family secrets. And I didn't have to waste any time wondering if my mother would have told me, overprotective is my mom's middle name. She wouldn't have told me. My mother's parents had been dead against the marriage. They hadn't spoken to her since she refused to give my dad up. She'd been very young and in love, and I could guess that even in those days she didn't take direction well. Maybe they didn't tell her, just booted her out, never darken our door again, etc. They never made any attempt to meet me, their first grandchild either. Maybe my mother found out later somehow, after I was born. Maybe it was my dad who'd found it out. I'd never seen my father again after my mother left him, or any of the rest of my family. Only my gran, who was maybe choosing to see me privately and alone, not in deference to my mother's feelings, but because her own family had ordered her to have nothing to do with me. God, her story just gets more and more complicated. Oh, maybe my gran had some other reason for believing I was okay. Or maybe she didn't know why my mom had left. Maybe she thought it was my dad's business associates. Magic handling families can be pretty conceited about their talent and pretty offended by commoners feeling they have any rights to inconvenient opinions. Maybe my gran thought her family were just being arrogant. If you were in the 90%, it showed up early. Usually, if you weren't born with a precocious ability to hoist yourself out of your crib and get into really repulsive mischief, the next likeliest time for you to begin running amok was in the preteen years, when magic handling kids are apprenticed for their first serious magic handling training. When my gran taught me to transmute. Okay, the sane 5 or 10% most often have personalities that are uninterested in magic. One of the recommendations for someone who finds out they're in the high-risk category is not to do magic, even the most inconsequential. My mother would never have let me have all those meetings with my gran if there'd been any chance. It's interesting because she keeps coming up with justifications like, okay, I don't have any of this part, or any of this in part of my family at all, and yet it's still possible. Anyway, she might have. My mother makes Attila the Hun look namby-pamby. If she wanted me not to be a bad magic cross, then I wouldn't be, by sheer force of will if necessary, but she might still have wanted to know what she was up against. I hadn't come home and started knifing old ladies, or setting fire to stray dogs. I was kind of a loner, though, a little paranoid about being close to people, a little too interested in the others. My mother would have assumed that my gran had tried to teach me magic and that she hadn't been successful. So my mother would have assumed the Blaze magic genes were weak enough in me, or her own compromised heritage had missed me out. Maybe my mother could be forgiven for being a little over-controlling, because she'd never be sure. Bad magic crosses don't invariably show up early. Some of our worst and most inventive serial murderers have turned out to be bad magic crosses when someone finally caught up with them. Sometimes it turns out something set them off, like doing magic, like finding out they could. And I hadn't done any magic in 15 years. No. I like how that's her conclusion. Just no. That's it. That's the whole paragraph, actually. I stopped chewing. Pat and Jesse assumed I'd thought of all of this before. They were assuming that's why I hadn't been able to talk to them. Had been afraid to talk to them. The licensing thing was pitiful. They would know that I knew that too. If it was just a question of not being a certified magic handler, hey, I could get my serial number and my license. The beer cats would snuffle a little about my not having done it before. But I was a model, cinnamon roll baker citizen. They'd at least half believe me that I'd never done any magic before. They probably wouldn't even find me. Licensing was a red herring. Pat wouldn't have turned blue over a question of late magic handling certification. So I had to be afraid of something else. I was afraid of something else. They just guessed wrong about what it was and how I got there. They were, in fact, offering me a huge gesture of faith. They were telling me they believed I wasn't a bad cross. They must really love my cinnamon rolls. Shit. What they didn't know was that I'd rescued a vampire, which might be read as the polite, subtle version of becoming an axe-murderer. Have some more scotch, said Jessie. And now, of course, the only thought I was dreading telling them about what had happened 2 months ago. Okay, let this dread be for the telling of the story, nothing else. The story of how I rescued a vampire, which I wasn't going to tell them. I put my mug down because my hands were beginning to shake. I crossed my arms over my breast and began rocking back and forth in my chair. Pat dragged his chair over next to mine, gently pulled my hands down, held them in his. They were a pale blue now, not so knobbly. I couldn't see if he still had the 6th fingers. I said, speaking to Pat's pale blue hands, I didn't hear them coming. I spoke in a high, peculiar voice I didn't recognize as my own. But you don't, do you, when they're vampires? There was a growl from Theo, not what you could call a human growl. It was a creepy, chilling, menacing sound, even knowing that it was made on my behalf. Briefly, hysterically, I wanted to laugh. It occurred to me that maybe I hadn't been the one human in the room a few minutes ago when I'd felt like a rabbit in headlights. Jesse let the silence stretch out a little, and then he said softly, How did you get away? There was another muddle leaning up against the wall in front of us, someone sitting cross-legged, head bowed, forearms on knees. I didn't realize till it raised its head with a liquid, inhuman motion that it was another vampire. How? What is she going to say? I took a deep breath. They had me shackled to the wall in what I guess was the ballroom in one of those really big old summer houses at the lake. I was some kind of prize, I think. They came in to look at me a couple times, left me food and water. The second day, I transmuted my jackknife into a shackle key, which isn't a lie, technically. You transmuted worked metal? I took another deep breath. Yes. No, I shouldn't have been able to. I've never done anything close. I hadn't done anything at all in 15 years, since the last time I saw my grand. It almost didn't occur to me to try. I shivered and closed my eyes. No, don't close your eyes. I opened my eyes. Pat squeezed my hands. Hey, it's okay, he said. You're here. I looked at him. He was almost human again. I wondered what I was. Was I almost human? Yeah, he said, what you're thinking. I tried to look like I might be thinking what he thought I was thinking, whatever that was. Soph is full of others and parplets because it's vampires that are our problem. Sure, there are lousy, stinking demons and bad magic crosses, but there are lousy, stinking humans too. We take care of the others, and the stray cops take care of the humans. If we got the sucker sorted, the humans would calm down sooner or later. Let the rest of us live, you know? And then we'd be able to organize and really get rid of the Ubis and the goblins and the ghouls and so on, and we'd end up with a relatively safe world. There was a story. I hoped it was no more than a myth, that the reason there still wasn't a reliable prenatal test for a blood magic cross was the prejudice against part bloods. Ah. Oh. Jesse said patiently, you transmuted worked metal. I nodded. Do you still have the knife? I dragged my mind back to the present. I decided earlier that the light in the office was good enough, so I nodded again. Can we see it? Pat let go of my hands, and I pulled the knife out of my fuzzy pocket and leaned forward to lay it on a pile of paper on Jesse's desk. It lay there, looking perfectly ordinary. Jesse picked it up and looked at it. He passed it to Theo, who looked at it too, and offered it to Pat. Pat shook his head. Not when I'm coming down. It might crank me right back up again, and we can't keep the door locked all night. What would happen if someone knocked? I said. You're still a little blue around the edges. Closet, said Pat. Closet, said Pat. Nice big one. Why we choose Jesse's office. And we would be so surprised that the door was locked, said Jesse. Must be something wrong with the bolt. We'll get it checked tomorrow. Miss Seddon is all right, isn't she? Miss Seddon is fine, I lied. What was wrong with her was not their fault. Ray, said Jesse and hesitated. I was holding myself here in the present, in this office, so I was pretty sure I knew what he wanted to ask. I don't know, I said. I haven't been back to the lake since. There's a really big bad spot behind the house. Maybe that's part of why they chose it. And when I got out of there, I just followed the edge of the lake south. If we were to take you out there, no. Let's say tomorrow. Will you try to find it? Oh, that's bad. It had little to do with what I hadn't told them that made the silence last a long time before I answered. What I had told them was plenty for why I didn't want to go there again. Yes, I said at last heavily, I'll try. There won't be anything. I know, said Jesse, but we still have to look. I'm sorry. Shit. I nodded. I need some water. I picked up my jackknife and put it back in my pocket. I looked at Jesse. Excuse me. Then I looked at the blood-smeared table knife lying on his desk, and he watched me looking. That's the next thing, isn't it? He said. Okay, you have some kind of line on worked metal. Some pretty astonishing line, it must be. But that doesn't explain... Oh, the phone rang. Saved by the ringing phone. He picked it up. Well, better send him up then. We all looked hard at Pat. He wasn't blue at all. Theo unlocked the door. Mel came through it. Oh boy. Mel came through it about 10 seconds later, looking to fit murder battalions to softs with nothing more than a table knife. What the dharmic hell do you red-eyed boys think you were up to, keeping a law-abiding member of the human public incommunicado for over an hour? I managed to keep a straight face. Red-eyed boy, or girl, is an accusation of other blood. Just the sort of thing a pissed-off civilian would say to a soph. They all looked perfectly blank. Sorry, said Jesse. We didn't mean to keep her incommunicado. We were getting her out of a bad situation as fast as possible. Brought her in the back way, of course. The media jokers can't get to her here, but we forgot to send word to the front desk that we weren't holding her. Excuse me. Sure you forgot, I thought. Mel, still quivering with fury, and equally where Jesse was lying, turned to me. It's okay, I said. I was a bit hysterical. They let me have a shower, I added inconsequentially. I'd had a rough night, and it was getting harder and harder to remember what I'd told whom and why. A shower? said Mel, taking in my fuzzy bunny clothing, probably the first time he'd ever seen me in anything that didn't involve red or pink or orange or yellow or at least peacock blue or fluorescent purple, and I realized he didn't know what had happened. He wouldn't, would he? You don't destroy vampires by rushing up to them and sticking them with table knives. The only sure thing about the night's events was that there'd been some kind of fracas, some messy kind of fracas, and I'd disappeared with some softs. There were probably half a dozen incompatible versions of what had happened out there by now. No wonder Mel was feeling a little wild. It's sort of a long story, I said. May I leave now, please? Before you start asking me about tonight, I thought. That's what I'm here for, said Mel, throwing another good glare around. See you tomorrow, said Jessie. What? Said Mel. I'll tell you on the way out, I said. Sleep well, said Pat. You too, I said. Is she really going to go back with them? Oh my God. They gave me my soggy clothes and a plastic mega food bag, and I managed to jam my feet into the clammy, curled up sneakers so I could walk. Jessie offered to call a taxi, but I wanted some outdoor air. Even Midtown Civic Center outdoor air. We had to go back to the coffee house. The wreck was there. Mel had walked over. Well, I don't know about walked. He'd come over without vehicular assistance anyway. He was still putting out major anger vibes, even after a successful rescue of the damsel from the dragon-encircled tower. The dragon had been blue and essentially friendly. The real problem was about the damsel. I had never wanted someone to talk so badly, never been so unable to say what I wanted to talk about. And if I managed to tell him, what was he going to say? I'll start ringing up residential homes for the lethally loony tomorrow, see where the nearest openings are. Don't even try to tell me what happened till you've had some sleep, said Mel. The goddamn nerve of those guys. I thought Pat and Jessie were okay. I think they are okay, I said, regretfully. In some ways, it would have been easier if they weren't. Jessie and Theo did get me out of there, and they couldn't help being, professionally interested. Mel snorted. If you say so. Listen, the whole neighborhood is talking about it, whatever it is. The official soft report, what they've already fed to the media goons, is that you were an innocent bystander. None of us is going to say anything, but there were a lot of people in that alley by the time Jessie and Theo got you away, and it's unanimous that you were... There was a pause. I didn't say anything. He added, Charlie seemed to think Jessie was doing you a favor. That soft could protect you better than we could. Yeah. Further destruction of personal worldview, optional. Mel sighed. So we hung around the phone at the coffee house waiting. Charlie and me. We sent everybody home, including Kenny, sworn on pain of having his liver on tomorrow's menu not to tell your mother anything. The phone didn't ring. So then we rang soft and got yanked around by some little sheepwood on the switchboard, and that's when I came over. I'm sorry, I said. The coffee house was dark, and the square silent and empty, although there was some kind of distantly audible fuss going on somewhere. It was easy enough to guess was a block or two over and down a recently defiled alley. We went round the side of the coffee house, and I could see the light on in the office. Charlie, drinking coffee and pacing. He had his arms wrapped around me so tight I couldn't breathe almost before I was inside. Charlie is such a mild little guy, most of the time. I'm okay, I said. Charlie gave a deep, shuddering sigh, and I remembered him backing me up with Mr. Responsible Media. I also remembered all the time he'd spent in years past encouraging my mundane interests and learning to make a mayonnaise that didn't crack. How much garlic went into Charlie's famous hash. My early experiments would turn out to be the ancestors of bitter chocolate death et al. There was no magic about Charlie, nor about most restaurants, come to that. Human customers tend to be a little twitchy about anything more magical than a waitress who can keep coffee hot. I wondered about my mother's motive in applying for a job as a waitress all those years ago. I was already making peanut butter and chocolate chip cookies while we were still living with my dad, if there was a grown-up to turn the oven on for me, and if she was looking for nice, safe outlets. By the way, I really want peanut butter and chocolate chip cookies right now. Tonight. It's connected with what happened when I was gone those 2 days. I was afraid of that, said Charlie. Jessie wants me to try to find the place it all happened, out at the lake. They're taking me out there tomorrow. Oh, bloody hell, said Mel. It's been 2 months. They don't have to go tomorrow. I shrugged. Might as well. I have the afternoon off. The lake, said Charlie thoughtfully. I told everyone I'd driven out to the lake. I hadn't said that what happened afterward also happened at the lake. Till tonight, my official memory had ended sitting on the porch of my old cabin. Yes, I was held at a house on the lake. They want me to try to find it. Either Mel or Charlie could have said, when did you remember this? What else do you remember? Why did you tell Soph when you haven't told us? Neither of them did. Mel put his arm around me. Gods and friggin' angels, he said. Be careful, said Charlie. I can't believe this is happening. One of the few advantages to getting to work at 4:30 a.m. is that you can be pretty sure of finding a parking space. When I come in later, I'm not always so lucky. I had to park the wreck in a garage lot that evening, and it was locked at 11. Mel took me home. When we got there, he turned the bike off. The silence pressed against me. The sudden quiet is almost always loud when you've been on a motorcycle, and got somewhere and stopped and turned it off, but this was different. Mel didn't say any more about the night's events. He didn't say any more about Soft taking me out to the lake next day. I could see him wanting to. But as I've said before, one of the reasons Mel and I were still seeing each other after 4 years was because we could not talk about things sometimes. This included that we both knew when to shut up. It was blissful. Spending time with someone who would leave you alone. I loved him for it, and I was happy to repay in kind. It had never occurred to me that leaving someone alone could harden into a habit that could become a barrier. It had never occurred to me before now. I had to repress the desire that he not shut up this time. I had to repress the desire to ask him if I could talk to him. But what could I have said? I don't even know how she'll breach the conversation when you get to that point. Because she doesn't even fully understand what happened. Anyway, we stood there in the darkness for a minute or two. He was rubbing another one of his tattoos, the sand wheel, on the back of his left hand. Then he came to me to check that I still had Kenny's bicycle and the tires weren't flat. Then he kissed me and left. See you tomorrow, is all he said. I reached over my head to touch the wards strung along the edge of the porch roof on my way indoors. They were all Yolande's. Her wards were especially good, and I'd often thought of asking her where she got them, but she didn't really ask you long questions. I had noticed that her niece, when she was visiting, didn't seem to ask questions either, beyond, I'm taking the girls downtown, can I bring you anything? And the answer would probably be, no thank you, dear. I wiggled my fingers down the edges of my pots of pansies on the porch steps to check that the wards I'd buried there were still there, and that a ping against my fingers meant they were still working. I straightened the medallion over my downstairs door and lifted the go-away mat in front of the one at the top of the stairs to check that the warding built into the lay of the planks on the floor hadn't been hacked out by creatures or creatures unknown. I flooded the charm paper that was wound round the railing of my balcony to make sure it was still live, blew on the frames of my windows for the faint ripple of response. I didn't like charms, but I wasn't naive enough to not have good basic wards, and I'd been a little more meticulous about upkeep in the last 2 months. Then I made myself a cup of chamomile tea to damp down the scotch and the cheese. I took off the bunny pajamas and put on one of my own nightgowns. The toilet paper I'd held. There wasn't any blood on the soft thing. I put my still wet clothes in a sink full of more soap and water. Tomorrow I would put them through a washing machine. I might throw them out anyway or burn them. I still hadn't burned the cranberry red dress. It lived at the back of my closet. I think I knew I wasn't going to burn it after the night I dreamed that it was made of blood, not cloth, and I'd pulled it out of the closet that night in the dark and stroked the dry, silky, shining fabric, which was nothing like blood. Nothing like blood. My sneakers would live. I had dozens of t-shirts and jeans if I decided I wanted to burn something, but I wasn't going to sacrifice a good pair of sneakers if I could help it. I pushed open the French doors and went out and sat on my little balcony. It was a clear, quiet night with a bright quarter moon. When Yolanda had mice in her kitchen, I had set take-'em-alive traps and driven the results 20 miles away and released them in empty farmland. Wards against wildlife are notoriously bad, hence the electric peanut butter fence to keep the deer from eating Yolanda's roses, and a house ward successfully against mice and squirrels would be almost the monkey spinner that a charm to let suckers walk around in daylight would be. I couldn't kill anything larger than a housefly. I'd stopped putting spiders outdoors after I read somewhere that house spiders won't survive. When I dusted, I left occupied cobwebs alone. I hadn't drawn blood and anger since the 7th grade playground wars. I don't eat meat. I'm too squeamish. It all looks like dead animals to me. On the days I cover in the main kitchen, the only hot food is vegetarian. Maybe my mother had successfully coerced and brainwashed her daughter into being a nice, human wimp. But I'd blown it. I'd blown it when I turned my knife into a key because it was the only way to stay alive. Maybe only because I didn't know any better, I wanted to stay alive. I looked down at my arms, at my hands, cupping the tea mug, as if I would start growing scales or fur or warts, or turning blue immediately. Most demon blood doesn't make you big or strong or blue, though, whether it comes with magic or ability or not. A lot of it just makes you weaker or stupider. I'd been doing okay as my mother's daughter. My life wasn't perfect, but whose was? Yes, I'd always despised myself for being a coward, a wuss. So, there are worse things to be. And then I had to drive out to the lake one night. They'd started it. And I may be a wuss, but I've never liked bullies. Maybe, if it was all about to go horribly wrong, I could at least go out with a bang. How cute and sweet and winsome and philosophically high-minded that I didn't like bullies, that I wanted to go out with a bang. I was still a coward. I had a master vampire and his gang on my tail. I was all alone, and I was way out of my league. Oh, Constantine, I whispered into the darkness. What do I do now? I don't know. What is going to happen when she goes out to the lake again? It's bad. I just feel bad about it. It's just a bad idea. Don't do it. I slept the moment my head touched the pillow, in spite of everything that had happened. It was very late for me, though, and I'd had 2 generous shots of scotch. The alarm went off about 3 hours later. I woke strangely easily and peacefully. I can get by on 6.5 hours, just, and only if I'm feeling lively generally, which I hadn't been lately. 3 hours sleep doesn't cut it under any conditions, but I sat up and stretched and didn't feel too bad. And I had the oddest sensation, as if someone had been in my bedroom with me. Given the events of the nights before, this should have been panic stations, but it wasn't. It was a reassuring feeling as if someone had been guarding me in my sleep. Get a grip, sunshine. What the fuck? She can't go back there. She can't. She can't. Kitty, thank you. Terrorizing me once more with this beautifully written novel. It's so much fun to read. Thank you very much. Until next month.